Today's hearing revealed yet another glaring example of how power, partisanship, and accountability collide at the top levels of government. Senator Welch's questioning of Attorney General Bondi was both measured and sharp, underscoring the critical stakes for Americans when elected officials and federal leaders let ideology take precedence over serving the public good. This moment serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of such actions. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below with your thoughts. Your voice matters.
Senator Welch.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney General Bondi. I have noticed that at various times when one of my colleagues is pressing you, you come up with something in their background. So I'll be waiting for my turn, but you don't have to do it right now. So let me get to my questions. One of the things that you mentioned, and I agree with this, that it's really tough on the various federal workforce, including our law enforcement folks, who are not getting paid because of the shutdown. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. But I also think that wasn't the whole story. There is an issue here that's going to affect Americans, whether they voted for President Trump or voted for Vice President Harris, and that is the loss of health care, where on November 1st, everyone who is getting Affordable Care Act help to buy insurance is going to get the notice of premium increases. And I got a letter just today from a Vermont family, nuclear family of 5, husband and wife, 54 and 55, with 3 kids, one of whom has acute myeloid leukemia. And the apprehension that they have is that if we don't solve this problem, and November 1 is a urgent date, then their family premiums will triple. It'll be beyond their ability to pay. So I'm assuming that with respect to the threat to health care for families in your state of Florida, in my state of Vermont, you would share that concern and hope that we would resolve that.
Senator Welch, I would be happy to speak with that family too, because there are many nonprofits that help with children with terminal illnesses, and I'm involved in some in Florida. So we would be happy to talk to you about that. As to health care, the government is shut down. It's my understanding, maybe you're not one of them, but because many Democrats want health care for illegal aliens, and that's what shut down the government.
Let me be clear.
That's one of the sticking points, and I don't know if you voted for that or not.
This actually is important to all of us, and the lament I have is that if this health care goes away, this premium support, it is really going to hurt families in red states and blue states. And in Vermont, I mean, we voted Democratic, but we have a lot of good folks who voted for President Trump, and their health care is jeopardized. And there's a November 1 deadline that is coming up. And the reason I'm saying this is that I think it's important for us to try to work out together a resolution that's going to be beneficial to people you care about in Florida and voted for President Trump, and people I care about in Vermont who voted in some cases for Vice President Harris and some for President Trump. So it's not just Democrats not wanting to negotiate. And in fact, we do want to negotiate, and that's why I'd encourage the president to encourage my colleagues on the Republican side to sit down with us and try to see if we can make some progress. Another topic, with the respect to voting rights and the letter that your voting rights chief sent out, we got one in Vermont, and it's a demand to get all the information on the voting file. And in that letter, in the announcement of that letter, the chief indicated an apprehension about the voting process being taken over by, quote, the left. Now, do you have any information with respect to Vermont about a takeover of the voting process by, quote, the left?
Senator, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to. We are currently involved in voter roll lawsuits in 6 states. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's a letter that went out demanding that states, including Vermont, provide all the voting file information,
right.
Includes personal information. But when that letter was sent out...
That's perfectly legal.
But there was an assertion by the chief in this division that this was to deal with the fact that the voting process has been taken over by the left. So we got one of those letters in Vermont. And my question to you is, what do you mean by the left? And do you have any evidence that the so-called system has been overtaken by the left?
We must have fair and free elections.
No, I know that. But I'm asking for the specific basis.
And we will have fair and free elections in this country.
Okay,
Senator, I'd be happy to talk to my chief. Who was it? Who said that?
It was your chief, which I assume you would know who that is. Here's the question here, okay? There is a point of view that is in dispute here about the fairness of elections. But you have the power as the as the Attorney General to use the authority of your office to make demands on states, and you did that with Vermont. That's within your right to do it. I'm not disputing your legal authority to do it.
Is Vermont disputing turning over the information to our office?
Vermont is. The Secretary of State is. And you can resolve that with her.
And we have every right to have that information.
Yeah, here's
Senator.
where I'm going.
Why wouldn't they want to turn it
You're
over?
a prosecutor with the awesome authority to make the decision that you're going to start an investigation against the state or against an individual. And I know from your experience as a county prosecutor and as the Attorney General in Florida, you took seriously that obligation to have a factual basis before you'd proceed, right?
Senator, I take that role, I take my oath very seriously.
All right, so what I'm
and
asking,
I take fair and free elections in this country very seriously.
We all
that
do.
information, our office is entitled to have that information. And we are involved in litigation on that. And I assume we'll be involved in litigation with Vermont.
We have a Republican governor in Vermont. We had our former Republican governor was the treasurer for many years, and also the Secretary of State with election responsibility. What I'm asking is, do you or does your head of this voting section have any factual basis that you can point to that justifies your demand that Vermont turn over all this confidential voting rights information?
Well, it would remain confidential with my office, and you just said that you have a Republican governor, so it doesn't make sense what you just said. We've asked that of every state, Senator.
Right, and I'm asking about Vermont and what the factual basis is, but we can move on. You've mentioned that you can't discuss pending litigation, and I think the committee by and large accepted that answer. But I did notice that you spoke at great length about pending litigation, specifically with respect to the questions Senator Cruz asked you about the sentencing of the Kavanaugh defendant. That's pending, right?
He was sentenced to 8 years.
I understand that, but that's on appeal, right?
We will be appealing.
Right, so that makes it pending litigation. So you made an exception with respect to the Cruz questions.
Hold on. No,
but you didn't answer any of the questions that you said were pending in litigation from any of my colleagues.
Those were facts that came out at the sentencing hearing. You're welcome to see the transcript of the sentencing hearing
I understand
with all the
that.
gruesome details of what they threatened to do to Justice Kavanaugh and other justices.
I condemn what that person did.
That was the sentencing.
But the point here is that that's pending litigation. You indicated you're going to be appealing. It's your right to do that. And you would not, you use that justification to not answer many other questions.
Justification? You're an attorney, Senator.
Okay.
You realize that.
I do want to go back to Homan. There's a tape, right, with Mr. Homan? I mean, first of all, is there a tape that has audio and video of the transfer of the $50,000?
You would have to talk to Director Patel about that.
No, I'm talking to you.
I don't know the answer, Senator.
Yeah, you do know the answer to that.
Don't call me a liar.
I didn't call you a liar.
You just said I know the answer. I said I don't know the answer.
Well,
you have to talk to Director Patel. What I said is that investigation was closed.
If you don't know, why don't you know whether there was a tape and video?
Senator, I believe that was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you think that it is of public interest for the people to know what happened to the 50 grand that the FBI turned over to Homan?
Did you hear what I just said? That was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. That's why I said I would not know.
It's not resolved. There's $50,000. Homan has it, or somebody has it. Do you have no interest in knowing where it is?
You're not going to sit here and slander Tom Homan. The FBI and Deputy Director Blanche said there was nothing.
I'm not slamming Tom Homan. He got to 50
Tom
grand.
Homan is doing, how do you know that? Tom Homan is doing a great job, as our borders are, keeping your border state safe. You're a border state.
Thank you, Senator Welch. We're going to
Madam President, can I have 1 minute?
Not right now. At the end, if you wait, we'll talk about it.
Point of personal privilege?
Not right now. Senator Tillis and many others have been waiting their turn.
I know, but
so
this
you
is
can
1
hold
minute,
until
and
the
it
end.
relates to testimony that she gave about me.
Senator Tillis, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
The hearing today wasn't just another procedural exercise. It was a magnifying glass on the very real concerns that families have about healthcare, voters' anxieties about election integrity, and the American public's shrinking trust in the rule of law. The initial moments of the hearing set the stage for a high-stakes conversation. Senator Welch immediately anchored her questions in the human consequences of policy decisions, emphasizing that real people are bearing the weight of government dysfunction. She shared the story of a Vermont family, a mother and father in their mid-50s with 3 children, one of whom is battling acute myeloid leukemia. Their healthcare premiums are set to triple if the Affordable Care Act subsidies collapse. This isn't just a political issue, it's a matter of life and death for some, a point Senator Welch was keen to make. She stressed that this threat to healthcare isn't exclusive to any political party. Whether families voted for President Trump or Vice President Harris, the pain of losing coverage or facing unaffordable premiums is universal. This wasn't merely a partisan critique, it was a reminder of how real the consequences are for everyday Americans when policy decisions, whether deliberate or negligent, undermine the stability of the health system. In this context, Senator Welch highlighted a critical truth often obscured by the political theater. Policy decisions have a direct, immediate impact on people's lives. The effects are not abstract. They create stress, financial instability, and sometimes life-threatening circumstances. Attorney General Bondi's response, however, was a deflection. She attempted to frame the government shutdown as a consequence of Democrats' alleged desire to extend healthcare to undocumented immigrants. While she expressed a willingness to speak with the Vermont family through Florida-based nonprofits, her answer missed the point entirely. She failed to address the systemic issue. Millions of Americans face the threat of losing coverage or paying skyrocketing premiums due to government inaction. This exchange revealed a common tactic employed by some in power, shifting focus away from systemic responsibility toward individualized charitable gestures. Instead of confronting the real problem at hand, policy choices that put millions at risk, Bondi offered non-committal offers to talk through intermediaries, dodging accountability for the broader, more urgent issues. The hearing then shifted to another crucial topic: voting rights and the integrity of elections. Senator Welch questioned Attorney General Bondi about a letter from her office that demanded personal voter file data from Vermont. The letter contained language implying that the election system had been taken over by the left. This raised a significant concern. Was a partisan narrative being used to justify federal interference in state-managed elections? Bondi's answer was vague at best. She declined to provide solid evidence for her claims, relying instead on her legal authority to request the information and invoking pending litigation as a shield. This exchange highlighted a fundamental tension in modern democracy: the balance between legitimate federal oversight and the risk of politicized enforcement that erodes public trust in election systems. It's a question that goes beyond legal technicalities. It's about whether the public can trust that the systems overseeing their votes are being managed transparently and impartially. Throughout this exchange, 2 recurring patterns in federal leadership became glaringly apparent. First, there is an overwhelming reliance on procedural authority to sidestep substantive accountability. Bondi leaned heavily on her legal prerogatives, repeatedly invoking pending litigation as a reason not to answer direct questions. Yet, her response seemed inconsistent, as she had already provided extensive commentary on similar matters earlier in the hearing. The second pattern was a repeated pivot toward individualized narratives, a tactic tactic to avoid addressing broader systemic issues. Whether discussing the Vermont family or disputes about the language used in election integrity discussions, the narrative constantly shifted toward a single case or issue, diverting attention away from the broader systemic challenges. This tactic may work in the short term to shield officials from uncomfortable questions, but it does nothing to restore public faith in the institutions that are supposed to represent fairness, transparency, and impartiality. The hearing also highlighted the lack of accountability in some areas of government. One such example arose around the $50,000 in FBI funds tied to the Homan case. Senator Welch pressed for answers, asking why there was no public record showing how the funds were used and whether the public had a right to know. Bondi's response was evasive, claiming that the matter was resolved before her tenure, refusing to confirm any details. This exchange illuminated a long-standing problem in oversight, the danger of opaque processes and unresolved matters. When public resources and legal integrity are at stake, the public deserves transparency, not just legal jargon and procedural deflections. The lack of clarity around such issues only serves to erode public trust in law enforcement and the justice system, especially when the funds at play come from taxpayers. One of the most striking aspects of Senator Welch's approach was her combination of empathy and meticulousness. She didn't shy away from acknowledging the constraints under which the Attorney General operates, but she also refused to allow those constraints to be used as an excuse for evading important questions. She drew a direct connection between policy decisions, human impacts, and institutional integrity. Welch was clear. Oversight is not a political exercise. It is a fundamental safeguard of democracy. She reminded us that good governance cannot afford to make ideological shortcuts when the stakes are as high as life, liberty, and the public's trust. The hearing's broader implications are impossible to ignore. Democracy relies not only on the exercise of legal authority, but also on the willingness of public officials to act transparently, responsibly, and ethically. When leaders prioritize partisanship or evasion over the public good, it is the American people who bear the consequences. Healthcare, security, election integrity, and the transparency of justice systems, these aren't abstract concerns. They are the measure of a government's commitment to its people. Senator Welch's questioning today served as a powerful reminder of the importance of oversight hearings. These moments aren't just about asking questions. They are vital instruments for holding leaders accountable, exposing threats to public well-being, and demanding that principles of fairness and equity be restored. In conclusion, today's hearing was not just a series of questions and evasions. It was a reflection of the larger challenges facing American democracy in 2025. The stakes are deeply personal for American families. Concerns about life-saving care, the integrity of their vote, and opaque decisions that affect law enforcement and justice. As citizens, we must be vigilant, and as officials, we must remain accountable. The work of senators like Welch reminds us that accountability is not optional. It is a cornerstone of democracy. Without transparency, integrity, and public trust, democracy itself is at risk. If you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to subscribe to The Liberal View for more in-depth breakdowns of hearings, investigations, and political accountability. We will continue tracking the stories that affect real people and uncover the policies that shape our future.